A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 56.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass. Living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren, in today's show, A Swift Kick in Your Comfort Zone. That's about getting out of your comfort zone, and we're going to kick your ass out of your comfort zone so you can actually make some progress in your life. And that's what we do, right, John?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I have to say, ouch. To hear the title, Getting Kicked in Your Comfort Zone, holy cow, man. We're getting edgy with our titles. But, all joking aside, let's just face it, the world is not a predictable and safe place. If you think that it is, then you're wrong. And that's really what this conversation is all about today. It's about understanding our comfort zone and the need that we have to push that comfort zone out, push against it and get out of it. Because when you're in a comfort zone, and if you think about it, when you're in a comfort zone, you're comfortable. You're not taking any risks. You feel safe and you feel secure. And what we're saying is there are times, if you really want to live life to its fullest, you need to push out against those boundaries. And there's a great book that you'd love to read. It's pretty old. As a lot of the books that I've read seem to be pretty old, but it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's written by Dr. Susan Jeffers. It's on our list of recommended reads on our website. Check it out. It's a short read, but it will change your life. It will change the way you view the world and how you deal with it.
Well, the book has stood the test of time, John, and probably a good thing if we recommend a book that was a bestseller at one time but is not, actively, there right now. You can find it in the library, so you don't have to go buy it. Just go check it out, and or you might even be able to download it off the internet for free. It's just, they have stood the test of time. It's a good book. It will definitely give you some inspiration.
Yeah, I'd have to say that was one of the first books that really kicked my ass to look at life differently and begin taking risks in your life or in my life. I read, we talk about taking risks, and we're not talking about foolhardy risks. Being fearful of taking a risk, it serves a purpose. It keeps you alive. It keeps you from taking terrible action or taking actions where you could really get hurt. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about taking risks that are going to make your life fuller. They're going to expand your comfort zone and make you enjoy life a lot more. I think, Tommy, you've been doing this recently, and you've been doing karaoke at your house parties.
Yes, absolutely.
And singing, speaking in public, or singing or dancing, anything like that, to where you're out in public and you're doing something new. It's very scary for some people. I just went to my daughter's father-daughter dance. My youngest daughter is in fourth grade and had their father-daughter dance. I always kind of thought of myself as a good dancer, but I realized, man, some of my moves are outdated.
John, your moves were outdated back in the 70s, man.
I was doing the sprinkler, and the grocery store, and
not to say that mine are any better, because I probably learned from you. Since you were a year older, and I thought you had a little bit more wisdom with the girls, because you were playing spin the bottle before I was.
Well, yeah, that's true. And the guys, the other fathers that I was with, when the YMCA came on, one of the dads said to me, he says, you you were dancing around it when this first came out, weren't you? And I was like, yeah. It's because I think that was the late 70s, right? Or I'm not sure exactly when the YMCA came out, but
I think so. I think it was 70s. Yeah.
I knew it, and of course, I'm being made fun of because I'm older than they are. But
well, they always say dance like nobody's watching, and also they say like if people were to observe you dancing, but could not hear the music, they would think you were insane.
And that's just fun to do, and that's one of the things too. If you're trying to get out of your comfort zone, do something that you think might be a little crazy and off the wall. And like what I do, and it drives my wife crazy. But when I go to the grocery store, when the cashier asks me, paper or plastic, I respond, it doesn't matter to me. I'm bisexual. Yeah, I'm bisexual. It doesn't matter. I could go for either paper or plastic. Doesn't make any difference to me.
When you were talking about like the karaoke, one thing that does is, I sang karaoke in front of about 35 people, my friends and family, and it was, I'd never sang in front of anyone before, and I serenaded my wife with an Elvis song, and it was really, it wooed all the women because they're all like, "Will you sing to me afterwards?" But what it did also is it helped inspire others. Like my daughter was like wanted to sing because she saw all these songs in the karaoke that she liked, but she was timid. She didn't want to do it. But a few minutes later, there she was, and before you know it, she's singing all night. So by you stepping out of your comfort zone, sometimes can inspire someone else just to take the chance. Because we think we're all going to look foolish, but no one cares about what you look like. They only care about what they look like, and no one wants to look foolish.
Yeah, that's so absolutely true. And a lot of the time when we're talking about getting out of our comfort zone, we're talking about fear. And fear absolutely has its place. It's a natural feeling. It's part of our genetic makeup, to fight or flight. But in today's world, fear can actually keep you in the same place and keep you in your comfort zone where you're safe and secure, and you're not really living life to its fullest. You're not taking advantage. You're not taking risks that can lead to great stories and mistakes that we learn and we talk about with other people. It makes life much more exciting, I think. I'm lucky. Back when I was a kid, my parents had a printing business, and I was deathly afraid of talking to strangers on the phone. And my mom and dad needed help in the printing business, and they would ask me to call customers who had orders to pick up, and that scared the hell out of me, man. I hated that, and I fought them on doing it. But now looking back on it, I'm glad, because I learned how to talk with people, and I learned these people were waiting to hear that their order was ready to pick up. It had nothing to do with they were looking forward to my call.
You were just a little kid, but there's plenty of adults that do not like to talk on the phone. I don't know how many times at work or, I see it with my mom sometimes, where they're afraid to make a phone call. It's like, oh, just call the bank and, check out this incident and, and talk to them. And it's like, it's like trying to pull teeth, I can understand as a child. In fact, what I hated, John, was party lines. That they don't have those nowadays. But back in the day, before there was cell phones, people used to share phone lines sometimes. Like we had a Dade County line, and we shared it with, I don't know who, if it was a neighbor or who it was. But I would pick up the phone sometimes as a little kid, and all of a sudden hear some creepy person talking, and it would like totally freak me out.
What? That was me, Tom.
Yeah. We also make a lot of prank calls back then too, because it was before caller ID. Oh, those were good times.
People are scared, and what happens when you're out at a restaurant and you're not happy with your meal? Like the meal is just totally lousy, and it maybe doesn't taste right, or it's not hot, or whatever. Most people will just kind of suck it up and not even tell the waiter that they'll say everything is fine when everything is not fine. They're scared to speak up, and in some cases, I think that fear is realistic. They, if you don't want to, piss off your wait staff or the people cooking your food, because you never know what they're going to do to it.
Correct.
But you if you're dissatisfied with your order, you should speak up. We should speak up for ourselves when there's a real need, not just to be whiny or complaining, not without purpose, but
the noisy baby gets the milk, right? That's a Cuban maxim that I heard from one of my friends the other day.
Yeah, or when there's something wrong going on, like I have a good story back when I was in Colorado and I was skiing with one of my buddies. We're putting our equipment on and everything like that, and this guy is yelling at this little kid, and my friend kind of steps up and says, please don't talk to him like that. That's just not the right thing to do. And the guy's like, this isn't even my kid. So this total stranger is yelling and telling off this little boy. And my friend, stood up and he's like, then I suggest that you walk away because you shouldn't be talking to him like that. And he stood up for him. Or remember Woolworth? No, it wasn't Woolworths. It was Montgomery Ward.
Mm-hmm.
It was on Sheridan Street and 56th Avenue. Back when I was a kid, my dad and I were in that store, and there were a group of teenagers kind of walking through the store. And as they were walking through the store, they were creating this path of destruction, like pulling over entire racks of clothes, and knocking things off, off the counters, and just, you could literally see this path of where they were walking through.
I didn't mean to do that though.
It wasn't you. It wasn't you. But not that time. It wasn't you.
That was later.
Because I didn't want my dad yelling at me. But my dad walked up. He says, "Stay here," and he walked up, and there were about 8 of them. And he walks up to him and he says, "I know you all aren't as stupid as you look. I suggest that you stop. I suggest that you stop destroying the store and just go about your business and maybe even get out of here." And those kids actually did listen to him. But it's taking those stands where you get out of your comfort zone. Being in your comfort zone means you're comfortable. So stepping out of it means you're not comfortable.
I don't think you were on the bus with me at this time. I think you were already driving your car. But one time we were driving home on the bus, and there was a girl, and she was really picking on this kid and spitting on him and slapping him, and he wouldn't do anything. He was a big kid, but he was so timid. And I was sitting there with my girlfriend. I was just I couldn't take it anymore. I was sitting up front of the bus, and I went back, and I wasn't going to fight the girl, but I didn't know what to do. I just started yelling at her. I was like, "Hey, stop it." And then she looked at me and she was like, "What are you going to do?" And I couldn't think of anything else to do. So I gave her the crazy lunatic Joker laugh. And I was like, and she was like, "That kid's crazy." And she stopped. And that kid was pulling a thorn out of a lion's paw. That kid was forever indebted to me. He just loved me after that, because I stood up for him. And I just, and it was out of my comfort zone. I really, I could have just said, "Oh, I don't want to get involved." But, sometimes you have to.
Yeah. You were exerting the laws of power at that, by doing that. Now that kid owed you.
Yeah, not really. But I mean, he just felt indebted to me. He was thankful that someone stood up for him.
It's the law of reciprocal action, I think it's called, where now he felt he owed you. But no, that's the right thing to do. And I remember that too, hearing, if you're ever in a fight, the best thing to do is to act crazy and do something out of the ordinary that they wouldn't expect. It's going to throw them off guard, and most likely they're going to back down.
Because no one wants to fight. No one wants to fight a crazy person.
Yeah, that's true. Every time that I fought, I didn't fight much, but when I fought, the veins would come bugging out of my head, bulging out of my head, and it was I changed. People were like, "Man, you You like turned like the Incredible Hulk. You look crazy, man.
Sometimes I think we pushed you that far just to see the veins pop out in your head.
I know you did. And it's just, I'd have some choice words to call you, but we'll wait till we're not.
I don't know if you saw this website, John, but this is a cool one I want to give to our listeners. So it's called whatismycomfortzone.com. So that's pretty easy to remember, right?
It's not one of your porn sites, is it?
No. Hopefully there's nothing like if you, mistype a digit, it takes you to one. But no, it's created by Marcus Taylor. And he created this tool, and supposedly it has a scientifically supported algorithm, and it leads you to have an idea, which he believes is the beginning of people taking action. And, this show is all about taking action. So, he says, think about it. If you never left your comfort zone, you'd be still living at home with your parents and lead a life like a boy in a bubble. You'd have no interactions with others. You wouldn't have, you wouldn't have a girlfriend or boyfriend or, a job. You wouldn't have gone to school because you would have been afraid to go outside your house. But if you go to that website, it's like, different questions that he asks, and you can check, like, have you ever skydived before? There's some for like adrenaline. There's some for professional, like, have you any interest in being a leader? Do you have an interest in starting your own business? Those kind of questions. And at the end, you get scored. Some of the data that Marcus discovered through the analysts, that he got from the survey, is he found that men have a larger comfort zone than women. Our comfort zone changes as we grow older. Sometimes it gets larger, sometimes it gets smaller. Depending on
the weather.
Yeah, I guess maybe unless you move to Arizona.
Cold water.
That's where old people move. Arizona and Miami. Arizona, in case your arthritis acts up.
I was thinking your comfort zone shrinking because it was cold water.
That could be. He found a positive correlation between how much we get out of our comfort zone and how much money we make. So he found that the entrepreneurs, athletes, and other successful people that took this test always scored the highest. And something that they had in common was they always did something that they were scared to do or hadn't done before. So it was a common denominator among all of them.
That's really interesting. That's what you just said supports what Dr. Jeffers says in her book, Feel the Fear But Do It Anyway. The way she kind of visualized your comfort zone was like a box, or I think maybe a circle would be better. And that your life is within that circle, your comfort zone. And the more you push out on any section of that wall, it not only expands it, and makes a different shape other than a circle. It makes the circle bigger. So even if you're just pushing out in one area, it expands the entire circle, not just like one little tiny section of it. And that makes sense to me, what you said about having money and, along with, and security, I guess would come along with that as well.
Yeah. And the other thing you said is that they all make a habit of doing that on a regular basis. So it's not like they have done it once or twice. They constantly push themselves out of their comfort zone, and that's what propels them forward.
It's as with any type of change, and we talk about change a lot on this show, it's the small steps that add up to, big rewards. And the same holds true with taking risks. If you take small risks, or let me back up. If you're afraid to take small risks that have very little consequence, then you're really robbing yourself of opportunities, to learn from your mistakes, to never fail. And we always learn from our failures. You can't, if you try and don't succeed, that doesn't make you a failure, because you learn from each attempt that you try. There's a success in trying.
What makes you a failure is never trying.
Yeah. And, by avoiding things with small consequences, you're robbing yourself of adventures, of, having some great stories to tell your friends about your adventures, and life transforming events in your life. Because we all know, like, even just reading a book can open it can change your mind about. It can open your eyes to a new way of life.
You were talking about the balloon and
Yeah.
how that's an analogy for your comfort zone. I heard another analogy that's very similar, but it was basically saying that, yeah, your comfort zone's the balloon, but we put that balloon in a box, and within that box, it doesn't expand, and it's us. We're the box. Our mindset is the box that's keeping that comfort zone from changing. So in order to get out of it, we have to eliminate the box so it can expand and we can get out of it.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I think that's great. Actually, I had said a circle, but I like your balloon analogy better because it's more three-dimensional than my little.
I guess I was thinking of how you were saying it molds and it stretches and.
Yeah. I mean, it's it expands. So the more you expand your comfort zone, the more likely you are to take more and more risks. Because you're really educating yourself about how to approach risk. And if you think about risk, most of us think of risks in extremes. We think of the best case scenario and we think of the worst case scenario. And the reality is more oftentimes not either case. You never are best case scenario. You're never, or worst case scenario. You're always somewhere in between. You're on a and I'm at a loss for words, but there's a range. It's not specific. There's a range or a scale of good to bad, and you're never at any one of the extremes, or most likely not at one of the extremes. But we think of it in extremes, like what's the worst thing that could ever happen? And if you're facing some type of fear, you're scared about doing something, and you feel like you're not moving forward, you could try to think about why you feel that way, and then start asking yourself some questions about saying, is this really real? I feel like this might happen, but really, what's the possibility? What's the likeliness of this happening? Is it going to be very likely? Or really am I just making it into a bigger issue than it really is? You can psych yourself out, but you can also use fear in a very positive way. If you think about, and I know we've all heard stories about people in extreme situations, to say like one person sees another person trapped under a car, and they go and they actually lift the car up, because their adrenaline level is so pumped up that they're actually able to have the strength to lift something off and unpin that person. That's very positive. The fear of death if you're fearful of dying, that's going to keep you more alert. It's going to keep you, aware of your surroundings, to keep yourself alive. It can actually, it can help you stay alive.
Okay, get this, John.
Sure.
This is a true story. This happened last year. Went camping at Lion Country Safari, and we're going through the lion cage, right? The area where the lions are is all these signs, do not get out of your car, right? At that moment, we're Jennifer, my wife, is telling us a story about our nephew who, in the morning, he had slept in a SUV, and she said in the morning, and he popped open the hatchback. And as he was doing it, you heard the Lion King music, right? And she was laughing about how funny that was. Well, at this moment, all of a sudden, she's eating trail mix. She gets choked, and she starts hitting her chest, and she tries to get out of the vehicle. And I'm like, no, you can't get out. So I pulled her onto the armrest of my truck and gave her the Heimlich maneuver right there in the middle of this lion thing. And no one knows what's going on except for my kids are like freaking out in the back. And luckily, she spits it out, and she's okay. But that was definitely an adrenaline, filled moment of fear.
So she tried getting out of the vehicle?
She tried getting out of that. She was going to get out of the vehicle, I guess, to try to attract attention for help. But I told her no. I grabbed her and I pulled her back in and gave her the Heimlich, and that saved her life.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at a joke that I think of. But it wasn't the Heimlich maneuver. It was the Heimlich maneuver. Sorry. the places where my mind goes. It's just better even not to question.
Yeah,
it.
maybe we had to mark this explicit and just let you loose.
No, we don't need to do that. It's not that good of a joke. So let's see. Where should we take this?
Well, here's the other thing, John. Sometimes it's not always necessary to live outside your comfort zone. You can't be outside your comfort zone all the time. You know, I mean, you got to go in and out, and you got to come back to reflect. Yeah. And you know, I mean, we don't want to be, you know, our adrenaline spiked all the time. And there's a point where you can take it too much. You know, if you get out of your comfort zone, you know, you want to push it. It's a boundary that you want to push a little bit, you know, but you don't want to go so far where it actually becomes harmful to you. You know, you don't want to do something stupid or something insane or something that you're not capable of and end up getting hurt or, you know, whatever it might be. You know, there's definitely a balance. But they say that also if you're a person that goes regularly and tries to stay in your, you know, if you become like an extreme sport athlete or something, you're always out there pushing for more adrenaline. What happens is they say there's actually it's a phenomenon called the hedonistic adaptation. And basically it's a natural tendency to be impressed by new things kind of just like becomes ordinary. And then like nothing, almost like our episode with porn where we're saying that, you know, when you look at porn, you know, at first it's like, oh, it's just seeing a slightly clad woman, you know, or whatever gets you excited. And then you have to take it further and further and harder in order to get that same dopamine rush inside your brain. Well, the same thing happens in life and in sports or career or whatever it is that you're pushing the boundaries on.
Yeah, I think it changes the way that you view reality in that, you know, it's you're expecting reality to be less and less real. I think, you know, I mean, it's like, especially with the porn, you know, your expectations are so far outside of reality that it starts to impact your own real reality.
No, it's like a drug. Yeah. I mean, you know, or a beer. If you take a beer, if you haven't drank for a long time, you have one or two beers, you catch a buzz. After, you know, you build up a tolerance though, and, you know, one or two beers doesn't do anything. You got to have 3 or 4. And before you know it, you're down on a 6-pack and, you know, it just progresses.
Yeah. I love that analogy. There's, you know, there is a tolerance to that. And absolutely, we're not talking about taking crazy risks just for the purpose of taking a risk. We're talking about taking risks for the purpose of personal growth and growing as a person and living a fuller, more meaningful life.
And it happens, you know, I've working at the radio station over the past couple of years, I got in that comfort zone where it was the same thing all the time and it wasn't hard, you know, nothing else was really, I got it down to where I could basically handle anything that came my way. And, you know, so it became boring per se because nothing was going on. And I lived in that comfort zone. I wasn't pushing myself. Here recently, we moved to our TV studios and now I've become in charge of doing TV as well. And it's like a whole new world. It's like all these systems I've never seen before. And, you know, things that, you know, before I just dealt with the audio, now I deal with the video, and it's like so many moving parts going on at once. And when something happens, I gotta, you know, it's like live. It's like you need to fix it right now because there's millions of dollars floating through these, you know, commercials and everything that they play, you know, with this programming. So it's very stressful. And what has happened is where I was dealing with like 1980s technology at my radio station because we had older stuff. All of a sudden now we have all the new technologies. It's all state of the art. And I'm a little behind and I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to, you know, catch up where at that time I could have been studying. I could have been keeping on track, you know, on top of current trends and stuff in the broadcasting field when I was at the radio station instead of just like hanging out and, you know, watching YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I had a similar situation with my work. I was in the comfort zone. You know, I was not challenged by it. You know, at that time in my life, my father was sick, and I didn't feel comfortable going outside of that comfort zone. I knew I needed a change. I knew I wasn't happy with work, but I had family situations to attend to. I had, you know, family responsibilities. My dad needed me, and I I didn't want it. It wasn't time to challenge myself. But since he died, I've been able to find challenge in other ways. So, I mean, just starting this podcast was, it definitely pushed Tom and I out of our comfort zone, because I mean, we talked a lot about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it, and back and forth. But there's absolute definite fear with putting yourself out there. And you finally recognize, you got to put yourself out there. You have to take a chance, because you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. I was reading about, comfort zones and fear, and came across a great analogy. I think it will make a lot of sense to our listeners. It says, imagine, and since we talked about the 7 deadly sins, I think this is probably in keeping with that as well. Gambling. Think about your comfort zone in the terms of gambling. If you're gambling with money that you don't care if you lose, then winning is very exciting, and it's like icing on the cake. But if you lose that money, you don't really care. It's no big loss. You could do without it. You didn't care if you had it or if you didn't. So if you lose, you take that gamble and you lose, what have you really lost? You probably had a really good time, that evening or whatever, even though you lost the money. It's just a way of looking, kind of looking at your comfort zone. If I'm not saying go out and gamble.
Yeah, because gambling can be a very bad addiction, man.
Yeah,
because what happens with gambling is you get that sunk cost
rush.
Well, you get the rush, you get the adrenaline, but you also get that sunk cost thing where you're like, all right, I've put, so many hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or whatever it is that you're gambling into it. I need to get that back, because if you start losing, you're like, okay, if I just get that back, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
And, what happens is you keep on spending more and more and more. You win a few times and you get the rush. You think you're doing good. And before you know it, man, you spent all the money and then some.
Yeah. And my point of bringing and using the gambling analogy was absolutely not to encourage people to gamble, but just to rather the takeaway of it was that you need to enjoy the moment and recognize that, good and bad happens in this world, and some things we can control, some things we can't. Things do go wrong, and we can't control that, and it's okay.
And being in control is really part of the comfort zone. We're trying to control our existence. So that's why we find ourselves in the comfort zone, because we don't want things that scare us. We don't want things that are going to hurt us. We don't want things to really be that difficult. A lot of people like to cruise through life. The only thing is that you get caught in a rut and you end up there and, you live a mediocre existence.
Yeah. And, if you're interested in expanding your comfort zone, understand that the best thing you can do is you can start developing your coping skills. As I said before, bad things happen, and really what happens to you through those events is oftentimes it's dependent on your coping skills and how well you deal with what life throws at you. So, patience and curiosity are a great skills to have when you're trying to, expand your comfort zone. You're trying to learn from experience. You're trying to take risks, but take calculated risks. Don't put it all out on the table, to use another gambling analogy, which I'm not a big gambler, but don't put it all out there, but put a little bit out there, have a little fun at the moment, and learn and be curious.
So the other thing I've heard is, if you treat your life as a story, think about would you want to read that story, so do something that excites you. Do something that's a little different, something that, you can tell your grandkids about, or, something that you can leave a legacy, or something that just, get your blood boiling.
Yeah, back when I was at the University of Florida, and this is a great story, and because I feel like I learned a lot through it. But when I went to the University of Florida, I was just about ready to graduate, and that's when the Gainesville murders started happening. And a lot of students their parents were calling them home because it was a very scary time. There was a murderer, out and about killing people. And, I had worked very hard to get where I was at, and I knew that I couldn't leave. Is if I left, it would mean I'd have to start all over. And I wanted to get through school. I had enough. And I came to the conclusion that you can't run from fear. You're much better off when you face your fears and you're smart about it. Once you start running from fear, you're never going to stop running. And that experience taught me, you know what? If you're smart, if you're aware of your surroundings, you can survive the most adverse situations and confront your fears, and you can grow through that experience.
That's another point you bring up is sometimes it's not always you that keeps you in your comfort zone. Sometimes it's your spouse, sometimes it's your friends, your family. As you said, your mom, rightly so, wanted you back. But I mean, if our moms had the way, I'd be wearing a helmet every time I did a jiu-jitsu match, and you would still be living probably in your mom's empty spare bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't be allowed to cross the street without her holding my hand.
Johnny, where are you going?
She still tries to do that. I'm almost 50 years old, and she still tries to do that. I think there are just some things you never outgrow. I'm sure you do that with your kids too, and that's kind of
yesterday, Jen, I was making Hunter's lunch, and it was like some stir fry, and I was cutting up the steak, right? And she's like, he's 12. He can cut his own steak. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's just, I just do it, I don't want him to choke or anything. And she's like, she does the same thing.
Yeah. I do the same thing with my kids. Parenting is such a double-edged sword. You want them to grow. You want them to become independent, but you also want to protect them and help guide them through life and answer their questions and continue being Superman to them. But I think that's one of the hardest parts of being a parent.
Yeah. And the reason that we talk about these things, it's not because we're trying to seem like you have to do these things in order to have a meaningful life, but we just feel that everyone has potential, and to live up to that potential, you have to take some risk. So we try to figure out things that are holding us back, and we share it. We're not the guru on the mountain that we know everything. We just, we find things that have held us back, and we try to relate, what's our own experiences to you.
Yeah, and let's just face it. The world changed after 9/11, and this country became filled with fear, and in many ways it paralyzed us. Our pre 9/11 life was so much different than it is today. And it's good. Fear can keep you alive, but it can also keep you standing in one place and make you more of a target. And the world is even before 9/11, the world was filled with both good and evil. That did not change with 9/11. There was just as much. It seems like there was more evil, but there's always been that battle, and the use of coercion and force and fear is just dominating our society nowadays. It seems like, and we don't want you to be paralyzed in fear. If most of the time when we feel fear, it's the fear of the unknown. Well, how will you ever overcome that fear if you don't try to learn about what you're fearful of and grow from that and learn, and don't just stand still. Don't make yourself an easy target.
Well, another thing is, if you want to stop feeding your brain with fearful things. Turn off the news. Stop watching so much news, because half of it is garbage. I remember, I was a journalism student when I went to college, and we had an anchor from the local TV CBS affiliate that had come over, and he was retired, so he was going to tell it like it was, and he was talking about like newscasts lead off with crime, and crime makes up like 50% of the newscast, even though it was only like 10% of the actual news of the day. But they found that more people watched crime because it was interesting, but they would scare themselves to death. So what happens is you get a skewed version of the world. So they scare the hell out of you, and you're watching the news all the time, and you become fearful, and you constantly putting those negative thoughts in your mind. So sometimes just take like a news diet. Stop. You'll if it's bad enough, you'll find out about it, or you take a quick look at the headlines. You can kind of figure out what you need to know, but skip all the stuff that's just the highway chases, and the home invasions, or that someone in ISIS is going to try to kill you, because you need to be aware of that, but don't let it overwhelm you.
Yeah, what it really boils down to is you can control yourself. You can control your thoughts and your actions and even your emotions, how you feel about things. You cannot control anybody else, but you can control yourself in your own world. And with the news, most often what the news talks about are things that are beyond your control, things that you cannot change. So why bother with them? Focus on things in your own life that you can change, and you will start bettering your own life and making movement in a positive direction. I can't say that enough, is that you control your life. Don't let other people control your life. Don't let the news control your life. You make your own decisions, live with them, and keep growing and keep doing for yourself.
We had this last week, John, we had some tornadoes, and South Florida is not normally a tornado place. Still happen inside of hurricanes, like small tornadoes, but this was like a random event. All of a sudden, like in the morning, I looked on the news, and everything in my county was red. It was just lit up, like it was even turning purple. It's like the Doppler radar was as bad as it could get. And Jennifer called me, and at the same time she called me, one of my stations went off the air. So I'm walking with my boss, and I'm trying to play nonchalant, like not letting her hear distress. And she's crying, and she's going, I just saw a stop sign get ripped out of the ground. And she says, I've never seen the rain like this. I can't see where I'm going. And the first thing I said before she said that, I was like, oh, yeah, I saw that there was some really bad weather up there. And she's like, I don't need you to make me any more scared. I need you to calm me down. So I was kind of being the, but I was trying to play it off because, at the time I didn't realize how much danger she was in, because really just about a mile away from her, our other friend was on I-95, and 3 cars in front of her was a semi-truck. A tornado hit it, turned it over, and ripped off the signs from over the highway and started throwing them around and went through some guy's windshield. It was really crazy, man. Definitely something to be fearful.
Yeah, that but those things do happen, and in fact, my mom was impacted from that storm. But so I'm very familiar with it. But again, those things are pretty freak occurrences. Right. I mean, they do happen, but you really have no control over that.
I'm sorry, and but the point I was trying to get to, John, I'm sorry, I kind of misled you to this story. Yeah, but it was funny because on the news they say possible tornadoes, and one of the guys sitting next to me goes, yeah, it wasn't a tornado. It was Godzilla. Godzilla just came through and picked up the truck and threw it down and rampaged, all across the highway. Yeah. So it was just hilarious.
So I think we're sending our listeners mixed signals. We're saying, don't be fearful, expand your comfort zone, but be aware of Godzilla coming through town.
Listen to Roosevelt.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
All right, so get a swift kick in your comfort zone. John, you have any parting words?
I I usually do, and I think there are so many different great quotes out there. I would just say, if you're interested in learning how to expand your comfort zone, definitely check out Dr. Susan Jeffers' book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's going to help you a lot. Check out our website. It's on the list of recommended reads. It definitely made a huge difference in my life, and I hope it makes a huge difference in yours if that's the direction you're looking to take it.
Well, I'm Tom Stewart, and I thank you for listening to A Swift Kick in the Ass. Make sure you go to swiftkickintheass.com, sign up for our email list, and inside there you'll get access to our membership site, which has courses, tutorials, tools that will help you live a better life. Thanks for listening. See you, John.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Peace.